We don't have compassion for the pain of others because most of us are so busy with our own lives. We might be attempting to think that we're sending love, but energetically, we're not sending love. We're sending pity. And very quickly, we forget that these are our brothers and sisters. Open your heart and feel that love, not pity. Be in this world, but not of this world. Fuse with spirit, because the power in the world is not in the things. The power is in the consciousness. We chose to incarnate at this time, and then ask yourself, okay, why me? Why now? What am I here to do? You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled 3 Shamans and 5 Pieces of Wisdom. Now, as you probably know, I've been doing episodes about conversations with a sorcerer, and I'll continue that at some point, but candidly, those episodes are a lot of work, and each one can take me from 3 to 5 hours, and I don't have the bandwidth right now for that kind of time. So what I'm going to do is do some episodes like this that are short, they're punchy, and there are takeaways for you that you can start assimilating into your own life. So in this episode, I'm going to share 5 pieces of wisdom from Don Xavier, his mentor, benefactor, Don Juan, and from I don't know the right word, a colleague, but another shaman, a very powerful shaman named Doña Maria Sabina. To hear these 5 pieces of wisdom, keep listening. Okay, 5 pieces of wisdom. So these are very simple things. You may have even heard me say some before, and I don't mind being repetitive because I know that repetition is the mother of all learning, and we learn through repetition. But what I'm going to share with you, these 5 pieces of wisdom, 1 or 2 came from Don Xavier, 1 or 2 came from Don Juan, who was Don Javier's benefactor and mentor, also a shaman. And then 1 piece was from another shaman that Don Xavier worked with at the same time he was working with Don Juan, and this was Doña Maria Sabina. Now, I'll tell you more about her in just a moment, but let's dig into this wisdom. And again, I want to keep this short. I want to keep it punchy, and that you've got takeaways. But as I mentioned in the introduction, and maybe that wasn't the right place to mention it, I've been doing conversations with a sorcerer. Those episodes, I love doing them. I really, truly do, but they're also very time consuming. And right now, for the first quarter of the year, I don't have a lot of time bandwidth, meaning, the open calendar to be able to do them. And I might do 1 or 2, here or there, but I want to just bring you guys some wisdom that I know that will probably resonate with you and can obviously help you transform your life from the inside out. Okay, the first piece of wisdom, and this was inspired by the fires that are happening in California right now. It is January the 13th in the US, and fires broke out in California, Pacific Palisades, Tuesday, a week ago. There's been something like $1 trillion in damage, many thousands of people displaced, many people lost everything. The first piece of wisdom is this, and then I'll dig into it. And this is from Don Juan many years ago. And I'm just going to read it as I had it written down years ago. We don't have compassion for the pain of others because most of us are so busy with our own lives. Now, again, what prompted this particular bullet was what happened and what's currently happening in the fires at the Pacific Palisades. But in the same vein, there are people still living in Asheville, North Carolina, that had the floods and the hurricane months ago, and people there are still homeless and living in tents. And most of us are so consumed with our own life that we fleetingly have compassion for something like, oh, okay, that really sucks. That's bad. That's not good. And very quickly we forget that these are our brothers and sisters, no matter where they are in the world, whether they're in Argentina or Russia or Australia or in California, wherever. These are real people going through real hardship. And we get so caught up in the me world. And this is not to feel bad about ourselves, any of this. It's about awareness and just noticing where we have our attention. And I'll break this down even further. Let me give you an example that might hit home a little differently or a little better. And I'll come back to what I was talking about here in just a moment. Is when we're doing, and I've noticed, hey, guilty as charged, when we're doing really well in life and we're metaphorically on top of the world, we often get so absorbed in our air quote, even though it's artificial, we get absorbed in our success, not even noticing the things that are happening to other people around us to some degree. I remember many years ago, some friends of mine, this was back when I lived in Texas, and a good friend of mine that I'd been friends with for many years prior was getting a divorce, and it was a very messy divorce. And during that divorce, because we both lived in Dallas, I was basically on call 24/7 as a good friend. And of course, it's an exaggeration, but I was there for whatever he needed because it was a very devastating divorce for him. And I was there whenever he needed something, 100%. And I had a lot of compassion for what he was going through. Mainly, and I knew it was his experience, but he's a friend of mine and someone that I loved, and a good friend. And I remember, and a couple of years later, I had some things going on in my life, and my friend was flying high. I mean, things were going great in life for my friend, and I was very happy about that. But yet, when I needed help, my friend was so absorbed in his own success and high-flying life that it was even seldom that I'd get a phone call from that friend, which is something that I did every day. And I'm not any better than anyone else, but I would text him every day. How are you? Do you need anything? Do you need to talk? Is there anything I can help you with? Do you want to talk through something? And I wasn't being a nuisance or a bother about it, but I wanted to be a support system. And I assure you, he took full benefit, and I wasn't going to say advantage because he didn't take advantage of me, but he took advantage of, meaning calling upon that support system. But yet, and we're still friends today, but yet when I needed something, the phone calls were far and few and in between. There wasn't a lot of compassion in my observation for what I was dealing with and I was going through. And I'm not judging and I'm not criticizing because we've all been there. But my point and what Don Juan was trying to make, most of us spend so much time placing attention on me, center of the universe, me. We put all of our attention on ourselves. We forget about the pain that other people are going through a lot of times. And I remember one time Don Juan saying that we all have this, and I've mentioned it on the podcast, that we all have this bag of rocks, so to speak, like a burlap bag of rocks on our back. And we all think that our bag of rocks is the heaviest bag of rocks, not even recognizing that everyone else has a bag of rocks. And their bag of rocks may be very heavy to them, even though it might not be very heavy to us, or vice versa. We need to have compassion for that and respect for that and recognize that we're all learning our lessons. So please don't take this as a chastisement or you're not good or any of that. But there's a phrase that I love. I'm going to mangle this, but it's Mandela once said, Nelson Mandela said something along the lines of, when one person is in bondage, then everyone is in bondage. And then if you want to take that to more advanced spiritual concepts, we're all one. We are all one energy. We're all on one planet. We are all of one being, at least physically on this planet. When one person is in pain, that affects the entire daisy chain of humanity. But we don't tend to see it that way. So the point that I want to share with you before I move on, the first one, remember that we're all in this together, and we have to have compassion. We it would serve us well, which I have done many times in my life. It would serve us well, especially when we're doing well. If we see other people not doing well, what can we do to help? I can't tell you how to live, but that's how I live my life. The second one came from, and this was also inspired by me thinking about the fire. I had friends that had to evacuate. This is from Doña Maria Sabina. And this was around 2001 or two when she told me this. And those of us that work with Don Xavier, she told as well. Doña Maria Sabina, you can look her up online, was the healer to many Mexican presidents. Very humble, extraordinary woman, very humble shaman, as a real shaman is, but extraordinarily humble. I remember her saying one time that most of us don't send love to other people. We send pity to other people. Think about that. Now, the reason this was prompted by the fire in California and in Asheville, many times we think, oh, those people in California, I feel so bad for them. That is so horrible. It's so horrendous. I just feel terrible about what's happening to those poor people out there. Notice, that's not love. We might be attempting to think that we're sending love, but energetically, we're not sending love. We're sending pity. So when I look at what's going on in California, I simply, and I don't, because I've done podcasts on this. When I say, I don't generally say I'm sitting in meditation. I say I'm sitting in silence. I'm connecting, consciously connecting with divine mind. And when I'm sitting in silence, I'll just imagine me expanding my solar plexus and my heart chakra and sending that energy to people and animals and as such in California. Because I know if I'm here going, oh, poor people in California, that's so horrible. What's that frequency and what is that energy? As opposed to, let me just open my heart and send money. Who can I help? And I've reached out to friends of mine that are there on the ground. They live there. And I've said, what can I do? How can I help? And maybe it's only money, and that's okay because I'm not there physically. But what can I do to help? Because I care. I might not know these people, and I don't know these people. But where I work from here is, you know what? There have been times in my life when I've needed help. It's been many years, honestly, but I'm speculating there'll be more in my life. But there have been times when I've needed help, and there have been people there to help me and to serve without asking for anything in return. And they were doing it, and now that I think back, is I could feel it. They were doing it out of love, care, and concern. So when you think about California or any other natural disaster or anyone, we want to think from love, care, and concern, not, oh, pity, pity, pity. And, when it comes to people, and the context that Doña Maria used this in was we often, when somebody gets sick, oftentimes we don't send love to that person. We send pity to that person, kind of along the lines of, oh, poor Susan. I mean, that's so horrible. What happened to her? And then many people gossip about it with people around them. Did you hear what happened to Susan? I mean, and then they commiserate about it. These two people, yeah, Susan's such a wonderful person. Why did this happen to her? And yeah, I know, it's so horrible. And back and forth and back and forth. And of course, we have good intentions, but that's the energy of pity, not the energy of love. So the point here in this one is send love, open your heart, and feel that love, not pity for people, because it's an entirely different frequency and vibration. Another one here, inspired by the fire, because I live in Sedona, And I live literally, my property borders a national forest. Literally, and my home had to be built with all fire retardant, fire resistant building materials. And all homes here that are new in Sedona have sprinkler systems. Even my neighbor, there's 3 homes that were built where I live. My neighbor has an entire external sprinkler system on her home. Now, we had a wildfire here in 2008, and then we had one a couple of years ago. I was here, 2021, I believe. And my neighbor was like, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we have a fire. But where I want to go here, this point is we own nothing. And I've said it before, but maybe you'll hear it in a different way. We attach and we identify with things that we have that we own, and then we identify, and then we have that identity give us value. Meaning if we identify with that Mercedes Benz or that big home or that yacht or that island, for that matter, whatever it might be, when we identify with that thing owns us instead of us owning that thing. And partly what inspired this bullet point, the interview will go live tomorrow, and it's me talking to Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversations with God. And as we talk about at the beginning of our time together, Neil, before he wrote Conversations with God, the first volume, Neil broke his neck, but he was also on a fire. And he had mentioned in the interview, which you may have heard, that fire took everything from him. Just like people in California now, there are many people that don't even have clothes to wear or anything, any kid's toys or clothes, anything. And Neil said the same thing. He goes, it taught me that I own nothing. And this bullet point, I'd attribute to more than Don Juan, I'd attribute to Don Xavier driving home with me, because over the years, he has said over and over and over and over and over again, I own nothing. And that takes me back to a story about materialism and my own self. And I'll share 2 little stories here about owning things. Remember many years ago, I had a Rolex, and I have one now that honestly, I have a Tiffany Rolex, and I wear it maybe once a year. Literally, I generally wear my Apple Watch because it tells me like 84 different things. But when I had that Rolex, I remember losing it. And Don Xavier saw me about 8 months later. This is when I lived in New York City. And he said, where's your Rolex? Now, many years ago, after he apprenticed with a shaman, he went in the business world, which I've talked about before. He works only as a healer now and has since the mid-90s and as a shaman. But he knows fine watches because he used to trade a lot of different things, fine jewelry, diamonds, different things, import, export, etc. And he said, where's your watch? And I said, I lost it like 8 months ago, blah, 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 grumble, grumble, grumble. And he goes, look at you. He goes, you lost that watch 8 months ago and you're still hanging on to it. And that was a big lesson for me, I think, at that point in my life, as he was right. It wasn't in my life anymore physically, but it was in my life energetically as having lost something. No one's ever asked me any questions about the podcast or anything. And I don't think I've ever told this story on the podcast. This was about 25 years ago. But everyone that works as an apprentice of Don Xavier has a platinum diamond ring. It's a triangle. It's like this one here that I have if you're watching this live. And it must be 2 carats, a 2-carat diamond or above. And I remember one time like 25 years ago, to show you how attached I was, when I got the ring, I really liked it. And I remember we were doing a ceremony, and I don't know why this thought popped into my head, but I thought, I'm not kidding. I thought, oh my gosh, because I know he doesn't attach to things. And I don't even know why I had this thought, but I had the thought, what if he takes his ring and throws it down into this hole that we had dug for ceremony to bury different herbs and different things? It doesn't matter. I'm not going to go into details about that. But what if, and it was about 3 feet deep. And I'm like, what if he throws his ring in there? We're all going to have to follow. And I don't want to give up my ring, mainly because I just paid for it and it wasn't cheap. And I look back at that and I kind of giggle and I kind of laugh about that, about being attached to things. But the lesson was in the sharing, if he was guided to do that spiritually, he would have done it with no second thought. None. None. And I know that because I've seen him do it for years. So my point is, most of us live in so much fear about losing things, but we actually and truly own nothing. And then you think about what a waste of energy that is to be in fear about losing something you don't even own. To give you an example, think about something that someone else, you don't know this person, but maybe you saw something they have. Maybe it was a Lamborghini. Maybe it was a yacht. Maybe it was a multi-million dollar home. I don't know, just pick something. But you can bring something to your mind and you don't know the person. But if they lost that boat and it sunk or any of that, you don't feel any loss because you didn't own it. But when you own it, guess what? You feel the loss. But think about what I said. Because you don't own it, when it disappears, you feel no loss about it. But that's what we humans do. Because we attach to things, many humans, I would say most, we attach to things, we let those things define us, then we feel and have fear about losing those things. And then, for most people, that fear controls us. I haven't mastered it. But what I've learned is, I know this, I don't just think it, I'm not just aware of it, I know that I don't own anything. And I know that because when I had the stroke, boom, lights went out for me. So I know that I don't even own this body. And that was a beautiful lesson that I had. And I love that lesson of what happened to me at that time in my life, because it taught me some very valuable lessons. And I don't own anything. Now, in fairness, are there things that I enjoy in my life? Absolutely. No question about it. And we have these things because they bring joy to us, and that's great. But always remember this, we should not identify, the point is, we should not identify as the owner of things. We should identify as the creator of the things. But we don't own them. We just created them in our reality. And we get into our fear because we think we own it without even recognizing the bigger power of our consciousness that created that thing. And guess what? If we lose that thing, we can recreate that thing. So your takeaway there on this point is, don't identify with owning the things, because there's no power in that. Because if you lose it, that power is gone. If you lose that thing, identify with the power that created the thing, because all of the power is in the being that created it, not in the owner of it. And remember, you can never lose anything because truly you never own anything. Next one I want to share with you here is fuse into spirit. I'll keep the next two really simple. What that means is, I'm going to share a phrase with you, which was inspired for this podcast by the fire as well, but the fire in California, because there are also other fires going on in the world. But there's a phrase that I love, the phrase. And the phrase is this: be in this world, but not of this world. And to the last point, all the things that I were talking about are all things of this world. Your body is literally an incarnation that came from nowhere and is now in this world. And when you leave the body, you're not going to be of this world. You're going to be of another dimension and another world. But my point here, I guess I'll say it a simpler way. And the reason I was inspired to add this point is there's a lot of change going on in the world. And so many people are losing so many things. So many people are losing social structures. So many people are losing government structures. So many people are losing economic structures and economics. And to my last point, we tend to identify with those things. I don't work from there. Where I work from is fusing, and Don Xavier said that to me one time, fuse with spirit. Because the power in the world is not in the things. As I just said, the power is in the consciousness That's why we want to fuse with spirit, because when we fuse with spirit, meaning living from spirit, not from the physical world, when we live from source, we have the power of source. But to call on the power of source, we have to first think from source. Now, what I mean by that is many of us think from things, meaning we think from things like cars and homes and relationships or whatever they might be. But your takeaway here, your point that I want to share, the big point, is don't think from things. Fuse with source. And what that means is think from source. So don't think, which many of you get into, many of you, and I did for many years, is we think from things. What that means is we think from, I got to make more money. I want a new job. I want a new home. I want to live in a new neighborhood. I want to do this. I want a new car. I want a vacation. I want a partner, whatever it might be. Notice what we're doing. We are thinking from things. I'm going to say it in a way that'll be more clear, but I'm going to go back to what I said. We're thinking from things, but we're thinking about things. Okay, we're thinking about the home or the car or whatever it might be. And what I want to share is first think from source, which is what I mean by fusing with source. And what I mean by that is think from, I am the creator of all those things. Hopefully that makes sense. And that's what I meant by, be in the world, but not of this world. And that's an ancient phrase. It's been around for, I guess, many, many thousands of years. And that means your physical body is in this world and you're being in this world, but you're not of this world because your energy and your source, which I'm asking you to think from, is not just from this world. It is cosmic consciousness. Hopefully that made sense. And then the last point was from Don Xavier. And he said to me at one point, I was trying to create something in business many years ago. And he said to me, center yourself in the things that you want to do. What does that mean? Center yourself in the things that you want to do. And what most of us do, because we live in a distracted culture, we don't center ourselves in things that we want to do or be or create. We actually are like a volleyball, not a volleyball, a tetherball on a string going around the pole. The pole is a center and we're going around it, but we want to center ourselves like the pole. And we want to center ourselves on, I'm suggesting, our Dharma. Neil Donald Walsh and I alluded to this, and he talked about it a little bit on that talk. I'm of the opinion, of the thought, of the, I'm going to use the word belief, of the knowing and of the awareness. There are a lot of changes happening on the planet, and things are going pretty fucking sideways, to be honest, in a lot of ways. And candidly, this is not meant to scare anyone. This is not a scare tactic. Consciousness is shifting on the planet. And as it's shifting, we're going to see societies and governments and national boundaries and socializations and economies and many things around us collapse. So what we can do is we can center ourselves and know that we're on the planet at this time. We chose to incarnate at this time to be of service. I'm going to tell you right now with 100% certainty. If you're listening, and especially if you've listened for any amount of time to my podcast, you are meant to be here. Meant to be here with me, but you are meant to be on this planet at this time. And then ask yourself, okay, why me? Why now? What am I here to do? This is not true at all. But one of my students said, Jim, if you throw in the towel, what hope is there for us? Because we're all fucked. And of course, this was somebody in TCP and somebody that knows me through the transformational coaching program. And that's not a true statement whatsoever. But basically what she was saying is she looks at me as an anchor And if I throw the towel in, what are other people going to take as an example? And what are they going to do? So what I look at for me, and I'm centering myself on, what am I here to do? What am I here to do? And I'm going to be 100% transparent with you guys, as I always am. The podcast is in transition because my life is in transition, meaning I've done TCP for years, the Transformational Coaching Program. We're building it again. It's growing, and I'll do that for many years, I suppose. Probably. Who knows what will happen, but I intend that. But I know that I'm meant for even more significant things on the planet. Whether I shift the way that I do the program, or I expand and I do it for more people, or whatever it might be. I don't have an answer yet. But what I do know is I am centering myself on why am I on the planet now? And my suggestion to you for sharing this point is center yourself into your Dharma. Center yourself into what lights you up. Center yourself into what kind of service brings joy and peace to other people. From my perspective, that'd be the best piece of guidance that I could give you. Okay, of these 5 things, what is the common denominator? Your transformational takeaway is this. Your common denominator is you, obviously, but notice all of these things. What separates us from the wisdom and embodying the wisdom of these things, a couple of things. Number 1, it's our level of self-importance, it's our arrogance, it's our ego, and mainly it's that we don't know ourself. Because let me ask you, if we knew ourself truly from a spiritual perspective, from consciousness, if we knew ourself, we would constantly be of love and compassion for others. We would constantly send love and be of love and not pity. We would know, not think, not understand, we would know that we don't own nothing. If you owned nothing, not physical speaking, but spiritually speaking, and you knew that, the reason I create that distinction is because some people are saying, conspiracy theory, whatever, that the world is shifting and the powers that be are wanting people to own nothing and be happy with that. But the reality is we're on the planet and we all deserve to have abundance. But if you knew you own nothing, you would have no fear of losing anything. And you think about the things that keep you up and you worry at night about. These are all things related to fear and losing something. And it's an illusion because you own nothing. And then fusing in the spirit, obviously, is what I'm talking about, thinking from source, not from things. And the transformational takeaway, what gets in the way of every bit of this is we don't know ourselves as source. We don't know ourselves as spirit. And until we do, there's perhaps a good chance we will still wrestle with the things that I shared. So for now, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for listening. I'm very, very grateful for you listening and for you sharing, and we're growing and we have millions of downloads. So please, if you would, there was some reciprocity, please tell people you know that would get benefit from this podcast. Please tell them about it. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you over on another episode. Bye-bye.